So, welcome back to the 1760 sessions where we sit down with founders who are building systems and real impact. I'm Harry, as you all know, from 1760, and today I'm joined by Jim Bishop, founder of Conjunction Leadership, an executive coaching practice helping VPs and C-suite leaders at the world's leading pharma, biotech, and agtech companies navigate the hardest transition of their careers. So, a bit of background about Jim. He spent more than 20 years inside Fortune 500 life sciences companies, developing leaders before walking away to build something on his own terms. He's the author of a fantastic book called The Adventure Within. He coaches at the intersection of belief, biology, and behavior, and he's still logged over 5,000 hours with executives who've achieved everything on paper and feel stuck. Bit of a lengthy intro, but there you go. Jim, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. You do a nice job of reading that. So
Be good.
I appreciate all the compliments.
Did I miss anything off at all?
Now, other than my probably voracious consumption of podcasts and books, and I have 5 kids on the side, so I probably learned more about leadership than I did about or from my family than I did in corporate America for 20 years. So
Amazing. Well, if you have any recommendations of what I can listen to next, please do send them over. I'm constantly trying to broaden my podcast horizons, but I always find myself going back to Theo Von. I don't know what it is about him. So let's kick off with your origin story.
sure.
What made you walk away from 20 years in corporate America to start Conjunction Leadership?
Yeah. A lot of people ask me that question, Harry, and they'll ask, where did you get the courage? And reality is, it wasn't really courage at all. It was just feeling like my time there was done. It's almost as if you outgrow the wardrobe that you currently have. Um, I grew up in corporate America. My first job out of college, my internships, they were all in corporate type of roles, and I thought I knew how to play the game pretty well. Do the job, do a better job, make your boss look good. You move to the next level, and I had really successful career paths. I worked in marketing, market research to begin with. I kind of learned science, and that was how I was trained. So I came in and used the science and applied that to the customer base. And then pretty soon I realized that the science was easy, but people were hard. And as you were learning to put flawed and broken people in complex structures, sometimes the flawed and broken part of people showed up more than the structure did. And so I gravitated more towards my career in development, leadership, and training and things like that. And it just started making me come alive. And
Amazing.
I found a tremendous amount of success moving up, moving into different roles, leading teams, leading the organization, eventually career pathing, succession management, some of the ancillary type of HR roles, and then eventually moved into executive coaching. And it was about the same time that we were getting close. This was in 2018, so I had a couple years of practicing my coaching internally. And then the world hit a stop during the pandemic, and everybody was trying to figure out who they are again, including me. Um, and it was at that moment in time when I realized, like, I had a knack for this. I was doing it internally. My clients were starting to get restless and realize they could move wherever they wanted to in the world without actually having to move at this point. Um, and they wanted to take me with them, but a lot of them were going to other competitive companies, and that wasn't going to work. And I started thinking more creatively about myself and thinking, I could move with them. What's keeping me here? Why do I want to stay? Why do I want to keep building a career of helping other people get promoted when that also meant that my salary was kind of capped in a
Yeah.
non-revenue generating role, right? So it was at that moment I started ideating and thinking, and it seemed like things were starting to align, that it just felt like it wasn't anything bad. There wasn't any travesty or major catastrophe that happened. It was just a feeling like I've outgrown what I could do here. This place has served me well, but now my best gift is on the outside, and I just have to step into that. So
Amazing. It sounds like the transition was like relatively pleasant. It was quite natural. Um,
well, I'm tending to just share the Instagram highlight reel, not the scary voices that started to creep up after I made the decision, right? So,
yeah.
there's always the belief bullies and what I call the dream demons that kind of sit there in the back of the brain just a little bit. And once I made the decision, it was, you're not strong enough. You're not going to be able to do this. What if people don't follow you? What if you don't, the economy crashes and burns? What if the Great Recession happens? Or, any of those things. And then it's just stopping and realizing I didn't make this decision because I was betting on anyone else. I made this decision because I was betting on myself. And I knew what was inside of me. And as long as I kept bringing that out, it was going to be the best thing. So,
Do you know what? I can relate to your story a lot. Uh, so much. Like those belief demons, they were inside of me when I first launched 1760. I was working in corporate SaaS sales for 10 years, and I always felt like there was the sales team and there was me. And it was very natural for me to be like, do you know what? It served its purpose. It's given me 10 years of great experience in what I do and given me the fundamentals to go launch something else. But then the belief demons did creep in. But then you just have to remind yourself that you're doing this for a reason and there's
yep.
a greater meaning behind it. You mentioned the Instagram highlight reels, and then my brain just suddenly tricked to what you told me before. There was a moment that you said to me, you described it to me when we were last in a call. You said you were sitting alone in a hotel room during a brutal stretch of travel, asking whether you could genuinely lead your family while climbing that ladder. What was going through your mind in that moment?
That was what I call my wake up moment. And that actually occurred about probably, I'm guessing, 6 years or so before the moment of choosing to leave the organization. But um, yeah, there was about a 2 week stretch of travel. It was about the same time in our family that we had adopted number four, our child number four. And then we found out immediately we were expecting child number five. So our family was expanding quickly. And I was gone. I was chasing the dream that I had always wanted, the promotion and the responsibility. I had the larger family that we had also been wanting. And I found myself kind of exhausted at the end of a busy week, pulling my roller bag into the hotel, kicking my shoes off and sitting there and just hearing the air conditioner kind of whirring in the background. And my thoughts were spinning and I just was wondering like, what is off? Why is this sense of ambition not feel,
Yeah,
it doesn't feel right anymore. It just feels empty. Um, And as I sat there longer with that, I started thinking, well, if I didn't have my family, I could pursue my job more. If I didn't have my job, I could pursue my family more. And then I kept realizing these were either or trade off decisions. And I had to figure out how to put the and in between there. In reality is that's where the name conjunction came from for my business is realizing that you don't have to make the trade off decisions. If you put the and, you can figure out how to live your own unique
yeah,
path. And in that hotel room, I didn't know the answer. I really didn't come up with the epiphany, but what I did know was there were certain things that I had allowed in my life that I hadn't given permission to. Like I was doing it because someone else thought I should. And I needed to take my life back by making sure that I said yes to the things. And that also meant there were some things I needed to say no to. So I came back from that hotel room and I had a difficult conversation with the powers that be and my supervisors. And I just told them that this travel wasn't going to suit me anymore. And I didn't know what that meant, but that also meant I was going to be reassigned or looking for new roles. Um, and that decision led to a couple other decisions, led to a couple other decisions, and the years kept going past. And I kept following those things that were more true to me, even if it was at the expense of the matrix around me, if you will. And about 6 years later was when I finally realized, like, yeah, I've had a great career. I've learned a lot of stuff, and it's time for me to go do this thing on my own.
yeah.
And it's not like the journey ended there. The journey has continued on since
It
then.
journey just begun.
Yeah. But it's what I learned in that hotel room and why I was sitting there at the time was like I wasn't listening to my own internal compass. I was listening to all the external voices of what success would look like and what other people were telling me. Here's what you need to do to be a good dad. Here's what you need to do to be a good husband. Here's what you need to do to be a good employee. And I was doing all the things, but I hadn't done them for myself or because of myself. And that was the pivot when I came out of the cocoon, if you will, and I started living more as a butterfly, less than the caterpillar, and I started making decisions more on my own. So
Incredible. And then I always find like there's such a fine line in the corporate world of balancing job, family, but there are ways to get around it, I feel. And that's something that you've obviously found because sitting in that hotel room with that extractor fan going, thinking, what am I doing? There's probably so many different versions, other versions of people like you in that exact same situation that need to suddenly realize that actually I can pivot. I can do something else with everything that I've learned and give back in another way.
yeah,
Um,
Well, in fact, I know there are other people because I used to meet them in the bar because, instead of sitting in my hotel room with that
Oh,
uncomfortable
goodness.
feeling, I would just go hang out in the bar with them at the hotel. I didn't know them, but we had something in common because we were all road warriors traveling and figuring out how do we get back home or cancel the next trip. And now I meet them every day in my job. I meet them in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
role that I have today because those are the clients who are finding me going, I have what I wanted. Life is successful, but it doesn't feel significant. And I want to know that what I'm doing matters. I want to know that there's more. And I don't want my ambition to get stifled because I have to take my foot off the gas pedal to get that.
Do you ever miss the travel with work?
Do I miss the travel?
Yeah, yeah.
I still travel. I don't travel as much, but the difference is I travel with purpose. I travel because I chose to travel. I didn't, in the past, I would travel because that was an obligation of the job, right? That busy equated to value in many cases. So if I was busy meeting with customers or if I was busy hustling and meeting with my sales reps or whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't a personal choice for me to do that. It was an obligation of the job. Now it's a personal choice. I know when I go, I'm traveling with purpose because I know what I'm going to do when I'm with that other client or we're at that team meeting. Um, but that also means I say no a lot more, and we have been gifted a lot more tools, Zoom, Teams, whatever it happens to be, but we can get a lot accomplished virtually, but there are
Yeah,
still
of
times that
course.
we need to gather. So
I was thinking about it earlier actually, because obviously I'm now working from home a lot. I don't go into the office. I don't travel to work, and being a SaaS salesman, I was traveling nonstop. The novelty wore off very quickly. It was
yeah,
great at first. I was young, drinking in another foreign city, and it was everything that was cracked up to be. But then it was like, hang on, I'm not at home with my partner. I'm missing my pals. I haven't spoken to my mom in a while. And it was just like the novelty wears off quickly. And it's amazing that you can now travel with purpose. Okay.
yeah.
You can choose the client that probably needs a bit more help, probably needs a bit more of your FaceTime involved. So you can be like, right, I'm going to go over there. Um, is this why you've been choosing clients in Costa Rica?
Yeah.
Um,
Costa Rica, Bangkok, you never know.
Yeah, of course. So let's look at your framework, and that's belief, biology, behavior.
Sure.
You coach the person, not the problem, is what you said to me. So walk me through what that actually means, because it sounds very different from how most leadership development works.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in leadership development, right? So with no deference to the folks that are working in that space, there is a need. But I worked in, putting classroom events together or programs for leaders, and that's a behavioral modification play at best most of the time because you're bringing people in, you're giving them a framework, you're helping them learn that skill, you're giving them enough time to practice that skill, and then they walk out of the room and you hope that they practice it when they go back home and they've ingrained it.
Okay.
It could be conflict resolution, it could be sales skills, it could be even personality styles and assessments, but you're giving them some awareness that they have a chance to apply to their own behavior and go home and modify. That works to a certain extent for the right type of a leader, right? Because at some point we just need awareness and then we need practice and we need to put it into place. But what tends to happen is when you get to the executive level, you've probably learned most of those things sometimes in the classroom and sometimes by the school of hard knocks, right? You've just by years of
Experience.
experience have had to
Yeah.
learn some of those. So at a certain point in the journey, they no longer need um, behavioral modification types of work. What they're really looking for is kind of how to rewire their brain, how to create new neural networks in the brain that will cause them to get above where they're currently at. But it's not too dissimilar from any change in our life. We don't really want to change. We just want the change, right? We want what's on the other side, but it means I'm going to have to do some hard work to get there. And this hard work of rewiring your brain, rewiring your belief system, it's the hardest work that anyone is probably, really, I think the hardest work anyone can do because there's no real measurable impact other than, am I feeling it? Um,
Yeah.
the framework exists because what I would recognize is, yes, I could help you change a behavior and that will help you get different results, but you're not going to change a behavior if you don't believe it's going to work in the first place, right? So belief often engenders behavior. And that's a lot of coaches will work in those two spaces. They'll work in mindset and try to flip a belief so that the behavior will stick. Once the mind sticks, new things come. But I tend to geek out in the other space, in the third space, if you want to call it that, and that's the biology space. I'm trained. My master's degree is in physiology and behavior, so I just had a knack for it anyway. I wanted to learn more about all these chemical messengers and neural networks and the brain chemistry and all those kind of things. But what I started to recognize too was sometimes the belief won't shift because our brain has been wired a certain way for safety. Once you've learned how to do something so well, it creates a sense of identity for you. It creates literally networks in your brain and chemical messengers that reward you for that sense of accomplishment. So why would you want to disrupt that? And your biology screams and doesn't want that disrupted at all because that creates a sense of safety in your being, in your neural networks.
Do you find out where someone's safety is potentially, and then try and rewire it to get them thinking in a different way and in a way in which they'll believe in themselves?
Yeah, I don't try to rewire it. The client does the work, right? What I
Yeah,
get to do is just help them somatically notice like what is going on in their body.
yeah,
And I think a common coping mechanism for many highly successful leaders is they tend to live in their head, but they've forgotten that almost two-thirds of their neurophysiology lives below their head, right? It's not what I think, it's also what I feel. And if the body doesn't feel safe, it doesn't matter what the brain thinks. So um, we don't all have traumatic experiences, but we all do store memory in our body, right? And so, what I have to help them do is kind of hack that biology a little bit. We work in breathing, we work in somatics, we work in some just noticing to try to slow the whole nervous system down enough that the body can actually speak and remember, and then feel safe. Because
yeah.
then the brain will take on a new belief and it will be freed up, if you will, to start spending energy on creating new neural networks. But I've often told people it's like if you're, in the Neanderthal days, if we're being hunted by tigers and lions all day long, we live in fear and we don't have enough energy to actually start thinking ahead of the curve. The same thing happens today. We don't get hunted and most of us are not living in a spirit of physical fear. But in the world that we live in with all the volatility that's going on, plus all of the corporate downsizings and layoffs and the market fluctuations, it often gives us a feeling that's very same as being hunted by a tiger.
Yeah, it's the
And
fear.
our biology has to relax enough to give it some energy for our brain to literally have space to rewire. So,
Yeah, amazing. Very, very topical for me personally. Just my nervous system crashed at the start of this year. I was doing just too much, too soon, working too late, working out too much, not eating enough carbohydrates. And I've spent the past 2 weeks now I do follow along. I know this is very different, I appreciate it. But I do following YouTube videos just to calm my central nervous system down. So
absolutely.
it's encouraging for me to hear that, you're actually doing this work with your clients as well. Do you ever look into, well, help clients with potentially like neuroplasticity?
Yeah. I mean, it's a big component of this whole work. If we didn't believe that neuroplasticity exists, there's no reason to try to rewire the brain,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay,
but
yeah, I didn't even think of it like that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, if
That's
we believed that we were fixed and nothing ever changed once we learned what we learned, right? I mean, there are people who believe that, but I think if you look into your own individual journey, you know that you can constantly learn new things.
yeah,
But and we often think that as we get older, it's harder to learn new things. It's harder to learn a foreign language, or it's harder. It's not actually harder. It just means a lot of times what's happening is there's a lot more chemistry and neurophysiology that's happening below the brain that's stealing energy away from it that keeps us from rewiring or neuroplasticity from happening. Right. So if you think about it, the reasons that younger kids often study foreign language or learn something faster is just that there's just not as much memory being stored below the body
yeah.
that's causing them to feel safe, unsafe.
I
Right?
didn't think
So,
of it like that. I'm in the process of learning German. I say in the process, I'm at the very beginnings because my partner's from Germany. So I've promised I will. I just know from the research that I've done that it will give me a lot more longevity just by learning something new. So
yes.
it's positive to hear it from yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of friends that work in memory care, Alzheimer's, or in the pharmaceutical industry trying to solve that terrible, dreaded disease, right? But there is study after study after study that the constant learning of new things is one of the best things you can do to insulate your brain from memory loss, right? Or dementia. And so it's because it's physically changing the groove structure in your brain and it keeps plaque from building up. And so we want that. So
Incredible. So you mentioned the somatic piece, which we've been kind of loosely talking about, noticing what the body is registering before trying to change anything. How do you get a VP of of a big company to actually engage with that? Because it's must be quite a lot of work, and they might be a bit standoffish, or yeah,
yeah. Um it's like anything, one step at a time, right? Usually the first step of it is just starting to develop some sort of I try to understand where they're at in their degree of fluidity and understanding their emotional regulation, emotional self. So when I ask them how are they doing and they give me the word fine, fine really doesn't stand for any emotion, right? Fine is I'm effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional, all bundled together. Right. So that's
so true.
so when they tell me that, then that I usually know that we need to start with, okay, let's start developing the language around emotion. Um, so we'll learn happy and sad and joy and, grief. We'll start learning all the words. And then once they learn the words, they can tap into that. Then we can tap into where's that emotion in your body, right? Where are you feeling this sense, tightness in your chest, clamping in your throat, itching in your back, whatever it might be, constant chronic pain in your lower sciatica. I mean, those are all the symptoms that people will tell me, right? And I'm not a doctor. We're not trying to diagnose anything, but we're just trying to notice because pain or discomfort is just trapped energy in our body. Trapped energy is a trapped emotion. Trapped emotion can be freed if we understand what that emotion is trying to tell us. So it's that entire kind of rebundling process. And most of my clients know when they come to me that they're not coming. They might come because the quarterly plan didn't turn out the way they wanted, or they might come because they've got employees that aren't doing exactly what they want. But at the end of the day, those are the controllable things. They're really coming because they don't know how to control the rest of the things, right? And those are just the frustrations or the symptoms. So when we peel back the layers of the onion a little bit by little bit, they'll get into the space of like, okay, the problem isn't the problem. The problem is this, and this is what I'm feeling about the problem. And now this is where it's stored in my body,
Yeah.
and this is what I'm trying to do about it. And so we'll spend time moving that through. And then once they get it done, it's like all this energy is freed up for their brain to think creatively. And now all of a sudden they realize I've only been living in this kind of reactive space. What am I going to do with all this energy? And they go out and do amazing, beautiful things.
Yeah, incredible. So what's the most sort of like common belief pattern you see in pharma and biotech execs that could be just, costing them everything?
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of non-safety in the world, right? And many people have grown up in a place of not feeling cherished, loved, valued, safe. We tend to call that in the popular press today psychological safety, but not feeling seen. Um, and so there's two pervading themes. One of those, the wholehearted leaders fully believe that it's available to them and they can fully trust other people. Right. But if I've grown up in a place of non safety, then kind of the pervading theme is I can't trust anyone. And unfortunately, as the world gets more and more chaotic, I see more and more of that. Leaders who have grown up with a feeling of not being able to truly trust someone else. So they move into what I call overfunctioning. And that overfunctioning would look like high executive functioning skills, planning, strategizing, organizing, directing, controlling, all of those things that tended to get people rewarded pretty well for kind of getting things done. And they get to the boardroom pretty quickly. And so they rise to really high levels of leadership with this pervading belief that I have to control everything or it's all going to fall apart. But it's all behind it all is this false facade that if I don't control it, it's all going to come crashing down and I'm not safe or I'm not worthy. And it really comes back to the belief that I can't trust anyone else. I can only trust myself. And so there's a huge amount of you can imagine if someone grows up with a belief that they can't trust anyone else and a high rate of control or compliance is
Yeah.
needed in a business, then what happens is the downstream consequence is devastating because then they wonder why no employee ever takes ownership and the culture is terrible. Well, it's because the employee doesn't have to think for themselves and
And
they've never
then
been asked to.
is that control piece, then do you dive in and say what happened potentially in someone's childhood trauma? which means they do not trust other people is where my mind's going.
Um, well, there's an opportunity potentially for that. I would leave that to the mental health professionals to dive into more
Okay.
of the diagnoses.
Yeah.
Um, in the coaching space, what we would do is we would notice it, and if the coaching client is in a place of wholeness and able to look at that with full non judgment,
Yeah.
then they can move forward, right? But if they're in a place that they're not quite whole and they're not ready to go there, or they don't understand that that part of their life affected their future part of their life, then that retrospective piece of it is probably better handled by mental health professionals or somebody that has more of an emotional health degree. But I do find a fair bit of clients are coming to this realizing that, especially when you get to be somewhere between 40 and 45, that their previous life is affecting their future life more than they would like. And they're willing to look at that wholeheartedly. So in coaching, we can still move forward. We don't
Yeah.
have to have a diagnosis, right?
So you've worked with founders in ag tech, caught between board pressure, team expectations, and a brutal farm economy. How do you hold someone together when every external force is pulling against them?
Well, again, you're giving the coach too much of the credit. I don't hold them together.
Yeah.
I give them the space to hold themselves together, right?
Okay.
Um, and this is the place where, as you rise higher in the organization, it's not too different than climbing a mountain, but the air just gets thinner at the top. And when they're at the top, what tends to happen is I cave to the expectations of others because nobody's really telling me who I am anymore. Like when I was a frontline employee, my boss would breathe life into me and say, "You've got potential, and I see you moving here." And they would give me some positive and also sometimes corrective feedback. And that tended to happen. But once you get to the top of the pyramid, there's nobody giving you corrective feedback. I mean, the board may tell you there's some things that you need to do to get the P&L statement back in alignment or to manage costs or manage expectations, but they're not telling you how. Um, and because you have more power in the organization than most, no employee in their right mind is going to tell you exactly what they're thinking either, because they don't want to get fired or put on the short bus, or they don't want to get pushed aside, right? So that power dynamic gets all messed up. What happens in the coaching space is we just give the leader space to be heard and seen, and they can kind of collect all of their thoughts back together in a place where now when they go back out to the external world, they're more fortified to make sure that they can stay aligned with who they are. They stay in their own set of values. They stay in the decisions that they want to make, and they speak with greater clarity and
Yeah.
conviction.
It's almost like you're
I
giving
think,
them back their confidence.
yeah. I mean, just a quick example. One of my clients came to me and he was a founder, founded a really, really successful business. It got so successful, private equity got involved and they brought in some people with big titles and big names and wanted the company to really scale and grow. And he found himself no longer just being the founder with four of his buddies, but a founder and CEO with a growing staff of people that he didn't really know. And candidly, they didn't really know the mission of the business. They just knew how to grow a business. Um, Over time, he found his satisfaction was dwindling, and he came to me and he's like, "It's just not fun anymore." And I asked him when it was fun, and he's like, "Well, it was when all the weird people were here." And I'm like, "Well, who are the weird people?" And he's like, "The weird people are the people who helped me found this thing, and we didn't have titles and we didn't have jobs. We just did all the work, and we didn't know what it really meant. We didn't even know how to grow a business. We just knew how to serve a customer, so we did it." And he said, "But it's not fun anymore now because all the normal people are here." And I asked him, "Who are the normal people?" And he's like, "The people that have all the big name titles, and they came from the big jobs and the big firms, and they were recruited specifically to make this look like a legitimate business so that we can continue to build up the equity in it." And I'm like, "So what do you want it to look like?" And he's like, "I want it to go back to the way it used to be. I want it to be crazy again." I just asked him one question. And I said, "What keeps you from being chief crazy officer versus chief executive officer?" And that reframe allowed his brain the space to breathe. And he changed everything about what he did. He went back, instead of going to the board and telling them how bad the economy was and why they weren't performing, he went back and explained why it was even more important now that they save their customers money and why their solution was needed more than ever. And he put it the same message, but turned on the other side of it in a positive and put himself back into a place of leading that company. He
Okay.
started telling people the story of why he founded it, and the sales team came behind him. They wanted to change what they were, their job. Instead of being salespeople, they wanted to be called cost reduction specialists. They
Yeah.
wanted to change their bonus plan. They wanted to do everything about it. And now all of a sudden, everybody is aligned back to the mission of the company, and even the normal people, are acting crazy again. And just because he had the space to kind of get comfortable with the things he wasn't comfortable with.
Okay.
Right.
And you give them that space offense essentially, and it's a great story because it seems like once he's found out who he is and what he wants to achieve and the problems that he's facing, that means he can align everyone else in the business just based on changing the way his outlook is on things.
Yes.
So let's dive into the book if we've got time.
Sure.
You said it's an allegory, not a how-to. Why did you choose that kind of form?
Well, most of the clients that I work with already have a task list that's a mile long, right? So when you read a book that's a how to and it gives you the 16 steps or the 27 principles or whatever it is, I don't know how you are, but I read that and I scan through it, but I rarely do the 16 steps,
Yeah,
right?
it's too long.
And I felt for myself, and as a representative of the high achievement crowd, I was like, I don't want to write another book that makes people feel overwhelmed. I want to write a book that inspires them to do the work that will change them feeling overwhelmed, right? So taking clients and client stories and bundling them down into three fictional characters, it just allows people to see themselves in the journey of someone going through this internal wrestling of who was I, who am I, who am I becoming, what part of me needs to shift, what behavior is holding me back, what belief is limiting me. And so I just wanted to take three, and I also wanted it to be easy to read in what I call a couple cups of coffee. So 100 pages long, they can get through it pretty easily, and they start seeing themselves what is possible rather than what's overwhelming. So
You've hit the nail on the head there. Can I just say that? Because the amount of times I've bought a self-help book or a book that's going to help actually guide me through the next period of my life, sat down to open it wherever I am, coffee table, beach, whatever it may be, seen how this framework is huge of many different chapters I have to go through to get to the end result. I lost about 2 chapters and then I pick up a book on Vikings. That's probably generally what happens. It's literally happened verbatim every time. Um,
yeah, just
and there's
opt for
only so much
fiction.
more I can learn about Vikings, trust me.
That's good. I'm learning a lot about you, Harry, about where you went to travel and your love of Vikings. So
Yeah, of course. Um, so the subtitle is Why Successful Professionals Still Feel Stuck and How to Rekindle Their Craving for Significance. Why doesn't success end the journey?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Why doesn't success?
End the journey. So like, why doesn't it rekindle their cravings for success? That's what my kind of thought process was around.
Yeah. Well, what I would find, and it may not be typical with everyone. It was typical for me, and it was typical for many of the people that travel with me now. But success was defined one way to begin with, right? Success was having the things, right? Yeah, I got the title. I had the accoutrements that come with the title, whether that's responsibility or wealth. Sometimes that also was a false kind of success with significance, because I have the title, now I have respect. Um, but once you get those things, it's like the Olympian who's won 6 gold medals. Like, is the
Yeah.
seventh going to make it any better?
No.
Right? Probably not. And so what people start recognizing after a while is, so maybe the success thing isn't all it's cracked up to be, because the more stuff I have, the more burden that I'm owning, or the more people that I'm responsible for, or the more headaches that I deal with. And so it starts quelching their sense of adventure. Like, I don't want to take any more risks. I don't want to have any more fun, because more risks and more fun just comes with more responsibility, which burdens me too much. So let's just hunker in and play it safe, right? And it doesn't happen to everyone, but you've inevitably seen some people in their career where about the 20-year mark, they just start coasting and making sure they get the gold watch at the end, right? And they're not actually leaning into what comes next. Um, and that's the saddest part for me. So the whole purpose of this is to try and inspire people to get over that hump and say, yeah, success has to be defined differently at this chapter in the game, right?
Yeah.
Success isn't about having more. It's about putting your voice into the world. It's about creating more. It's not about consuming things. It's about creating. And once you've created and you uniquely put your voice into the world the way that you were designed and authored to, you're probably going to want to do that for a very long time, irregardless if you get paid for it. Right. So you don't have to coast to retirement. You don't have to coast until you're done. You get to keep doing what you were designed to do until all of your days are gone.
Yeah, and
So,
enjoy doing it. Yeah. So what do you want someone to feel when they finish the last page? Is that kind of what you just described there at the end?
yeah. Well, the danger is when it's not a how to book, they don't have a plan. Right. So,
Yeah,
a lot of people have said, well, why isn't there? What do I do next? What's the plan? Well, that's actually the feeling that I want them to have
yeah,
is, well, what comes next? I'm excited about this. I'm enthused about this, but where do I go? And oftentimes, if they knew how to do it by themselves, they would, right? But people don't know how to do this by themselves because we've got ourselves to where we're at pretty much by ourselves. So the feeling that they should have is, I'm going to need a trail guide or an adventure partner for this part of the journey.
yeah.
I'm going to have to live outside of my own internal thoughts a little bit and have that same sacred space that we were just discussing where I can get comfortable with the things that I'm not comfortable with. I'm not going to sit in a classroom and try and, learn another model or another framework. This is about me taking the adventure within and kind of retooling who I am so that my brain and my biology can actually match with my new identity. So,
Okay. I'm gonna have a take a read myself before the next time we speak. If it's only 100 pages, you've got me. Um, so I've got a couple more questions to finish off with. So
sure.
when we last spoke, you mentioned that look, every year has been bigger than the last. Essentially, what has been the hardest thing to let go of as you've grown?
Oh, that's a great question. The hardest thing to let go of. I think it also has evolved over time, right? But we talked about the belief bullies and the dream demons. So,
Yeah, yeah,
year one and year two, there was this moving from an employee mindset into an entrepreneur mindset, right? Where you have to enjoy the hunt as much as you enjoy the thrill of the kill in this, right? You have to enjoy the prospecting and the business development and moving
yeah,
that through, which I actually do like. But it was also contrasted with like, I used to get a paycheck every 2 weeks and it was just automatically deposited and it didn't matter how hard I worked, right? So there was always this kind of breaking that, but that kind of broke pretty quickly once I realized like that paycheck was limited and the harder I worked, the more I can earn or the greater my rewards, the more lives I get to
of
be a
course.
part of. Um, I think probably the bigger thing is as the business grows, I love journeying with my clients. I
Yeah,
absolutely do. Um, but I also work in a very unique model. Like I don't sell hours on my calendar. And so what I give my clients is unlimited access. But that means I have reduced amount of clients that I work with because I want them to be able to find the time when they come to my calendar to schedule once a week
yeah.
or once a month, whatever it
Because
happens to be for them.
why that
But that
model?
means
Sorry, go.
oh, that just means then I have to limit the number of people that I work with. And sometimes saying no to people is hard for me because I know, or saying not yet, moving them to the next, to the wait list, if you will. Um, and now it's getting to the point where, yeah, maybe I just will need to add a couple more coaches because there are a lot of people coming. And that isn't hard. It's expansive. It's an opportunity. It just means like I want to be a part of all the people that I work with because I love watching what they create in the world when they actually get this going. When someone steps into their full creative potential and they are on purpose for a purpose, it's amazing the way that their business changes. And my heart has always been for the leader of first, but then really I see into the lives of the employees because so many employees are stuck in a bad system with a leader who just doesn't know how to lead. And then it creates downstream havoc, not only on the employee, but on their families, their partners, or their loved ones. And I'm like, if we can start up here and help everybody else down below, it's hugely impactful. So I think that's a wrestling that I'm currently working on is like, how do we continue to expand this work? And how do I also allow myself not to be involved with all the things anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you've got this far. I'm sure you're going to figure it out. That point you made there at the end about the problem with your leadership and it trickling down, it does affect you because if you're not working with a leader who you don't agree with or potentially has their own issues going on, which bleed into the work you're doing as an employee, then that goes, you come home at night, you talk to your partner about it. It's a snowball effect. That resonates highly. And then that model you have, I really like the sound of the model you have of being available and on for whenever your client needs you, because I can imagine there are times to have time scheduled to talk about a specific problem is quite hard to do sometimes because often you forget what that problem really is or you have a hard way of articulating it. Just the example of a therapy I've done in the past where I've gone into the therapist session and been like, what was I going on about in my head this week? Like, and then
Yes.
it's hard. So I think that model is a really strong one to support people in the times that they probably need it the most.
Yeah.
Um,
I just find, I mean, it probably works if you wanted to put an hour on the calendar every week for people at a certain level in the organizational chart. But when you're sitting at the top of the pyramid, it's kind of what's on top of mind needs to be talked about, right? So if
yeah,
they had a difficult interaction with the board, it's best to talk to it right after that. Um, if they if we had every Tuesday at 2 o'clock scheduled, what's going to happen is 3 out of 4 times it's going to get canceled because their schedule changes all the time, right? So well, they get a link to my calendar. They can change it when they need to. They pop on there as much as they want to. They have my phone. They have my email address. They can text me or call me whenever they need to. And I just prefer that sort of relationship with my clients rather than the clinician approach where you've only got this much space on my calendar and we're going to debit your card every
yeah,
minute that we talk. So
a good way to do it. So to finish off with, what does conjunction leadership look like at full expression when you've built exactly what you set out to build? What does that look like?
yeah, Harry, this is a great, I love dreaming about this.
Okay, tell
And
me.
it's very present. You know, I talk a lot about this healing journey because it's present for me in my life, and it's been the thing that has pushed me closer and closer to my purpose. But stepping into the painful experiences of life, learning what isn't okay, learning where you picked up a pattern or a behavior, and that sort of feels a little therapeutic at times. But up till now, we've served the professional client well by serving them as a whole person. We don't separate life and work. We look at it all together. Um, but sometimes there is a need for greater intensity, right? The one-on-one and the virtual sessions are good. And occasionally we'll go on site and we'll do some work with them and their team on site as well. But I think what's coming next is a full-fledged intensive retreat type situation where we can get founders or executives out of their own space and into a space where they realize I'm not alone in this journey. There are other people into this kind of heart centered healing space where I want to become a better human first, and then I want that to make my business better. Um, and I really feel like that's what's coming next. Um, my book and the book that we have now describes the work. I think the next book is going to start describing more of what my healing journey has looked like and some of the pain and sorrow and hurt circumstances that have come in my life that have pushed it forward. Um, not as a biography, but more as a way to help other people realize
You're
you're
not
not
alone.
alone.
Yeah,
There's no single person on the face of this earth that walks a perfect life, right? And we can't just look for the Instagram highlight reel on how to live our life. We also have to look at all the things as purposeful and intentional to push us closer to who we should be.
amazing. And I'm excited to watch you grow and I'm excited to see the journey. I might have to come and join you on one of these retreats.
Yeah.
Jim, thank you. Oh, go on. Sorry.
No, or maybe we'll just have one in Bangkok. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm all for it. Or Dominican Republic, wherever. Jim, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed today's conversation. There's loads of takeaways for myself as a founder. And I'm going to include a link below to Conjunction Leadership. And yeah, Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
thank you, Harry. I look forward to following you further.
Cheers, brother.
Bye.